Renee Summerhour here with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. I'm sitting here with the one and only Al Mancini to talk about restaurants, and in particular, some of our local restaurants here in Las Vegas. It could be the end of the road for some of them because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So Al, go ahead and introduce these astound restaurant owners, and we'll dive deep into what some of these restaurants are facing right now.
Yeah, we've got a great panel here today. We have Mark MARRONE, chef, owner, partner of Graffiti, Blau, Locale, the Gemma Pizza. What am I forgetting, Mark? Egg Sammy as well. We have Jeff Weiss, who's the chef partner over at Valencian Gold. Also the author of a big op-ed that ran this weekend in the RJ, and Elizabeth Blau of Blau and Associates, who you probably know from Honey Salt right now, as well as Buddy V's on the Strip. And Elizabeth, I'm sure I'm forgetting some places. I apologize for that in advance. But three tremendous restaurateurs here in Las Vegas. Also, all three of you who have been very active in really trying to keep people fed during this problem, keep people employed, and to raise awareness about what's going on in your business. And that brings us to this op-ed, Jeff, that I know you authored this weekend with Paraz, your partner, about really, I mean, the headline saying your favorite restaurant is dead, and really painting a grim picture of where we are. And it seems that to me that your biggest problem right now is that we had this special session in Carson City, and it didn't address or didn't come to a resolution of two major issues. And I'd like to talk about both of those issues and how you feel they were addressed. Anyone can chime in here, but the first is business interruption insurance. As I understand it, most businesses carry a policy for business interruption. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but you're being told by your insurance companies almost across the board, it doesn't cover pandemics. Is that where we're at, that nobody's getting paid on policies they already have? And how would you like to see that changed, and what were you asking the government to do? Jeff, you wrote it. So
yeah, I know. That was a lot of questions. That was like everything in the article there that I think we covered. Starting with business interruption insurance, yeah, you nailed it, Al. I mean, basically, there are lawsuits across the country right now. So it's a federal problem and it's a state problem, right? So the problem with this entire thing that I wrote about, and that Elizabeth has been very vocal about, Mark has been vocal about, and we kind of coalesced it into this message this weekend. It's a multifaceted problem. It needs multifaceted solutions. What it doesn't need is these political promises, these perfunctory promises, I think I wrote, and dithering politicians who will say we need to do what's best for Nevada, but not actually do anything for Nevada. So in the instance of this insurance thing, what can be done? It's a tough question. Without that business interruption protection, we can't file claims. We can't see any of the money, which obviously COVID was an interruption of business. So that in of itself is one part of a much larger equation.
Well, I mean, I've actually been in touch with some people from the insurance industry, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the general gist of it is they have a policy that was not written with COVID. They have general policies not written with COVID in mind. Right. Every business in the world now needs to file a claim. The insurance company can't stay in business if they have to pay out on every policy they have. Right. So if they find a loophole, they're going to say this isn't covered. And if they tried to cover it, they would go out of business and nobody would get paid anyway. So the argument that I've heard from the National Restaurant Association seems to be that you guys want the government to not only insist that they pay out, but then that when they're writing these $1 trillion checks in bailout packages, that goes to backstop the insurance industry. Is that what any of you are asking for? Mark, I'll go to you on this one.
I mean, yeah, essentially it's a multi-tier problem from us to the small business all the way up to the top. And yes, you're right. If, the insurance companies had to pay everything out and had, no guidelines in regards to just paying a flat policy out and putting them all out, yes, you're right. They would go out of business. And that's where I think ultimately it goes all the way to the top, where the government has failed us in response time in regards to ensuring that these policies and these systems, when they make a decision to shut the whole country down, the ramifications of that, granted, I know we didn't have a whole lot of time to think it through, but we're still feeling the effects now more than ever of these decision-making. And so therefore, perfect example, you're releasing funds, great. If we have an insurance policy that entitles us to pay out the percentage of missed sales that we were supposed to get, then good. Part of that policy or part of that package should go to bail the insurance companies out there helping out small business if it's categorized that way, right? I think just like we're getting relief, whether it's PPP or things like that, Yeah, you're right. Insurance companies, especially ones that insure small business, should have support and backing of the government, just like we're asking for the same thing. I totally agree. I don't think that someone should go out of business to therefore keep us in business. That doesn't seem fair, and that's where the government seems to be skipping and missing a beat here.
Well, but to that point, it's like, then what are we paying a premium for? Then
100%.
why don't you refund me for the last 7 years? Because as far as I'm concerned, I wasn't closed down at Honey Salt because of a pandemic. I was closed down because of a government mandate to prevent the spread of COVID. And, you know, if we're worried about the insurance companies going out of business because of having to pay premiums, how about the restaurants going out of business because the landlords are expecting us to pay full rent? I'm at 50% capacity. I'm at 0% capacity in my private party room. And yet landlords across America are demanding 100% of their rent, and they don't want to give abatement. So, I mean, something's got to give. So the restaurants are all going to go out of business because we have to pay, but yet insurance companies should be given relief. So, you know, listen, I don't care who the government bails out, but like this whole problem needs to be looked at in a non-political, because as far as I'm concerned, we are all the victims of politics right now. We are the victims
100%.
of the Democratic Party, of the Republican Party, of personal agendas of parties, and regular people. The thousands of people, the 15 million people in the restaurant industry are the ones who are suffering.
Now, what about are there any like national groups on behalf of small restaurants lobbying? Because that seems to be the root of what we consider a lot of the problems in government, right? You have these people with fat pockets lobbying, creating these bills for them to go through the House, and people are lobbying for these. So do you all have a group that lobbies for small restaurants, for small businesses to get in there and put in a word on a national level?
Oh,
Renee,
go ahead.
Yeah, you nailed the problem, Renee, is because, you know, 4 months ago when this all started, the Business Interruption Group, which is Thomas Keller and Danielle Ballew's group that they started to help with the business interruption insurance. You have the international, you have the Independent Restaurant Coalition, but these groups are not well funded. They have just started. We've made enormous strides, but we can't compete against all of these wealthy lobbies. And that's what Jeff was talking about in the article.
You also, Jeff, you mentioned something else, and you talked about the difficult timeline, that you weren't given any help. You were given a handout with an IOU attached. That was a strong statement that you made when you were talking. I assume you were talking about the PPP. You were talking about the CARES Act. So could you explain, because I think it appears to me as an outsider that you were set up with, here's some money to keep you in business, but it has to be paid up back by a certain date, or you have to reopen by a certain date. Dates were put on it that you don't feel were realistic. Jeff, could you speak to that?
100% correct. So I was referring to, PPP and EIDL, in that we were given this money, which, I mean, again, granted, give credit where it's due. This was something that nobody planned for. There wasn't really a protocol, and they kind of slapped together and said, we're going to give you money. There's going to be this timeline. And then the timeline, as it went along, shifted and shifted. And I looked up today at my bank to see what's going on, and there's a page on their website that says, yeah, we don't know what's going on, so don't pay us back yet. There's really 3 tiers of individuals that need to be addressed in this situation. You have the banks at the top, the landlords in the middle, and the tenants on the bottom. The tenants, you know, obviously we have to pay rent, and all the money that we pay for our occupancy and all that goes up to the landlord. The landlord has their debt service as well, and they're stuck in the middle between, hey, trying to get rent from me and trying to pay off their bank and their debt. I'm certainly not, you know, necessarily on the landlord side. I am empathetic to the point that they're not necessarily the end all be all. They're just trying to stay in business too.
Do you guys have any idea when it might get better? I mean, is it going to be slow going and difficult going until we have a vaccine? I mean, do you see any relief in sight?
Well, the biggest thing is it's going to hurt us even more and more every day, because the bottom line is, for people to come out to eat, they have to have money. And the state is officially at a horrible unemployment rate. There's now restaurants that have opened on the Strip that are now scaling way back. McCarran Airport's about to lay off 900 people.
Yeah.
All of those people are the people that come to our restaurants to eat. If they don't have any money, of course they're not going to have any disposable income to come eat. The banks are the ones that are failing us here at this point because they're not supporting either it is the people that we owe the money to, whether it's vendors, whether it's landlords, whether it's property owners. They're not getting the breaks to them. And they're putting on those guys to make them really essentially really be the bearer of bad news. Like, listen, dude, your bill's still due. I don't know what to tell you. Because at the end of the day, the next day, he's got to go send that money back to a bank. And that's where the federal government doesn't step in and doesn't want to step in, it seems like, for us to be able to help out small business.